Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to St. Mark's College, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Nick Olkovich. I've had the pleasure of meeting and or learning with many of you. I think I know like almost everybody in this room, and if I haven't met you yet, I'm looking forward to meeting you tomorrow. I hold the Marianne Blondin Chair in Catholic Theology here at St. Mark's, and it's my honor and privilege to introduce tonight's lecture by the Reverend Dr. Ross Lockhart. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land we are gathered on this evening is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. We are truly privileged to live, learn, pray, and serve on this land. Now, it's my job to say just a few things about why we're here tonight, and who's helped to make this evening possible. You may have noticed that this evening's event is being co-sponsored by the Archdiocese of Vancouver. We're thrilled to have Eric Chow. Where's Eric? He wanted me to not point him out, but I'm going to point him out. Eric Chow, the director of the Proclaim movement, with us this evening. Special thanks to the communications team for all their help in getting the word out for this event. I also need to mention the college's very own Center for Christian Engagement, and to thank my fantastic colleague and our center's director, Dr. John Martins. John is also here with us this evening. And last but not least, many thanks to the Center for Missional Leadership just down the road at St. Andrew's Hall. And I'll say something more about Dr. Lockhart's connection there in just a minute. Tonight's lecture it's a public kickoff event, right, for a summit that we're hosting tomorrow. The Future of Ministry, forming and empowering leaders for mission. That's going to bring together ministers and leaders from all of the dioceses in BC and the Yukon for a series of sessions focused on formation and the practice of ministry. These folks are with us in the room tonight. Welcome, and thanks so much for accepting our invitation, for many of you coming from pretty far away, so that's exceptional that you've accepted that invitation. Tonight's lecture and tomorrow's summit have been made possible, some of you may know this already, by a Lilly Endowment funded Pathways for Tomorrow assessment and planning grant that focuses on forming leaders for congregational ministry. This weekend forms the first step in a larger implementation grant proposal that we submitted this past May. Our hope is that the conversations we have this weekend are going to help us identify some of the challenges and opportunities our local churches and dioceses face with respect to mission, but also lay the groundwork for more intentional collaboration and service to the formation of lay and ordained ministers across all of our dioceses. And then finally, I need to say something about the unique format of tonight's event, and this is where your active participation is so important. We want to learn from your own experiences in mission and ministry, so you should have, if you don't yet have that, you might need to get up in a second to receive a sheet of paper and a pen when you enter the chapel. And Ross's presentation, I believe, is going to come in 3 parts, correct? Yeah, 3 parts, with 3 opportunities for some small group discussion. So Ross will tell you a little bit more about that, but you'll be invited to maybe just turn to your colleagues beside you. And the prompts for each of those breakouts are on your handout, right? We're thrilled to have so many people serving in a wide range of ministries present here tonight. And if you're willing and able to jot down something of your own responses as we move through the evening, and that if you're willing to share those responses with us at the end, we'll make sure that you leave those before you leave. Sound good? Okay. Now for the main attraction. So, the Reverend Dr. Ross Lockhart is the Dean of St. Andrew's Hall, the Presbyterian Church in Canada College at the University of British Columbia. As Dean, Ross also teaches at Vancouver School of Theology as the Professor of Mission Studies. Ross holds a PhD from Vrije, Universiteit, Amsterdam, and is the author of West Coast Mission, The Changing Nature of Christianity in Vancouver, Lessons from Laodicea, Missional Leadership in a Culture of Affluence, and Beyond Snakes and Shamrocks, great title, St. Patrick's Missional Leadership Lessons for Today. He's also the co-author of Better Than Brunch. That's also a really good title, Ross. Missional Churches in Cascadia, as well as Christianity and Asian Religion in Vancouver. And he's editor of Christian Witness in Cascadian Soil and the Continuing Witness of the Missional Church. He's an accomplished scholar. Ross lives with his family on Bowen Island, BC, beautiful Bowen Island. So we're honored to have him here with us tonight. The title of his paper, I think, cuts to the heart of what we're going to be doing in the next sort of day and a half. Heaven on Earth, ? Research and Reflections Exploring Ministry on the West Coast. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lockhart.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for that beautiful and warm welcome. I'm just delighted to be here. President Jerry, thank you for having me and your wonderful institution. I have wonderful colleagues here at St. Mark's College over many, many years. I've been able to teach in the permanent diaconate program. I kind of moonlight for the Archdiocese as a Presbyterian, teaching, preaching. So John is here, Linda, Paul, Father Nick, so many wonderful colleagues here. So President Jerry, thank you for the work you do in bringing us together here at St. Mark's. It's a really exciting evening, and Nick was so kind to introduce the concept. I have a few things to present, more than a few things, and then we really want to carve out some space for you to have conversation with one another. So have a look now. If you don't like the person you're seated beside, this would be the moment to change your seat, but do so discreetly so you don't hurt their feelings. That would be really great. Yeah. I'm honored to be with you tonight and to be in the presence of ministry leaders from across British Columbia and the Yukon. So I thought I would start, of course, with our own beautiful rose garden here at UBC. And then if you look just in the distance, that's Bowen Island, where I live, but also the Yukon. That was a visit my family made to the Yukon. My wife, Laura, lived in the Yukon for a season of her life. And that's my daughter, Emily, smiling by the Yukon sign. So I imagine folks in the Yukon sometimes feel a little left out. So some of the pictures in the presentation are from the Yukon tonight, just so that you feel very much at home here in Vancouver. Again, my thanks to the organizers for this opportunity. It is a gift to gather with all of you, Roman Catholic leaders from across British Columbia and the Yukon, to discuss the unique features of ministry in this region. I really, really hope that tonight we can simply prime the pump for the good work that you're going to do together tomorrow. And so I hope as you go to sleep tonight, a lot of what we're discussing will kind of percolate and you'll come ready for all the good work tomorrow. And my prayer really is that some of what I present will resonate with your own leadership experiences, and where it doesn't, that you will take the opportunity to share with us where there are differences and distinctives in your region of the place we call home. For we do live very much in a distinct place, one that here in the Lower Mainland, where you're seated tonight of British Columbia, has been called various things, including Lotus Land over the years. I still recall my mentor and former Dean of St. Andrew's Hall, Dr. Stephen Ferris. I recall his advice when I called him to say we were moving to the West Coast from Ontario. Stephen said, "Oh, that's great, you'll love it here, but you really need to think of moving to the West Coast like emigrating to a new country." He said, "I know that you've both taught and you've been a minister of the gospel in the Maritimes, in Ontario, and on the prairies, but the West Coast is completely different than anywhere else in Canada." And Stephen was right. Having been raised on the prairies, educated in Ontario, and having served the church in places like Nova Scotia, I was not prepared for some of the cultural distinctives of this region. One of them being people's own sense of transcendence in everyday, ordinary life. "Isn't this the most beautiful place in the world?" someone said to me just 1 week after moving to Vancouver. I was a little offended, actually, thinking of how beautiful a big prairie sky is growing up in Manitoba. I responded, "But there are many beautiful places to live." But it didn't seem to matter to the other person. And I soon discovered that when it comes to the West Coast, some people were born here and the rest of us got here as fast as we could. Over time, I even began to say that the hardest part about preaching heaven in Vancouver is that people think they're already there. So what does ministry and mission, what does it look like in a context of ours here on the West Coast? This evening, my intention as a missiologist, that's the kind of fancy cocktail party word for the work that I do, a professor of mission, is to walk you through highlights of a 5-year research project on Christianity in Vancouver that will hopefully prompt some reflection and discussion along the way as you integrate what I share into your context. But we're going to set that work up by looking at some of the changes across the country in Christian identity and affiliation. In no way do I intend to speak definitively on what Christianity is like in Vancouver. That is where your experience across British Columbia and the Yukon will be so important, especially in your small group discussions, as you say, yeah, Ross may have been right on this, but I think he wasn't right on that where I come from. We want to hear those distinctives tonight and educate one another. Now, I don't know about you. It is a proud and a wonderful thing for me to be a Canadian, perhaps today now more than ever. And of course, the notion of being one country, sea to sea, it's deep in our roots. Indeed, sea to sea to sea, you're right. In 1872, the Reverend George Monroe Grant had crossed the prairies as secretary to Sir Sanford Fleming as part of the railway surveying process. Impressed by the vastness of the region and filled with the hope that one day a railroad would connect east to west, Grant used Psalm 72:8, "He shall have dominion also from sea to sea and from the river unto the ends of the earth," as a theme, helping to coin, of course, what eventually became Canada's motto, "From sea to sea." But of course, as you heard someone in the audience tonight remind us, today we usually say "from sea to sea to sea," acknowledging our Arctic Ocean, as well as noting our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the West Coast Salish peoples here on the UBC campus. Now, the people of Canada, they have always expressed religious worldviews, of course, including Indigenous peoples prior to European contact. But data on Canadian religious identity began in the 1871 census. When you think about it, it's quite remarkable, just 4 years after Confederation. From that census in 1871, it revealed that 56% of folks surveyed were Protestants, 42% Catholic, and then it drops from there, 0.05 as pagans and so forth. I mean, it has these old kind of categories for us. But when we fast forward, in the 1931 census, Roman Catholics were the largest religious body in Canada with 4 million people. Following it was the newly formed United Church of Canada, a merger of Methodist, Congregationalists, and roughly 2/3 of Presbyterians. They counted 2 million, and the Anglican Church also had 2 million. My tribe, the continuing Presbyterian Church in Canada, was less than 1 million, about 870,000. By 1951, we had the first census results that included the former Dominion of Newfoundland. And there again, the Roman Catholic tradition was the most numerous, the largest in Canada at 43.3%, a little over 6 million. And the United Church had 20% at 2.8 million. Again, Anglicans just less than that at 2 million. Presbyterians, always the runner-up, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And so as we look at census data, if your eyes have glazed over, don't worry, we're not looking at stats all night. But stats, I think, are important. And while I can do my own taxes sometimes, I really rely on other colleagues who are even better at stats. And my colleagues Stuart McDonald and Brian Clark at the University of Toronto have really done some excellent work looking at the changing nature of Christian identity in Canada after the Second World War. They went back to the 1941 census. As you know, the Canadian government asked Canadians all kinds of questions, including religious identity and affiliation, every decade. So they went from 1941 to the 2011 census. And you can see what they wrote here. Decline in Christian affiliation, membership, and participation started in the 1960s and has picked up pace rapidly since then. This trend, they write, is likely to continue and indeed accelerate as an increasing portion of the country's population, among youth especially, who have never been exposed to Christianity. In short, Canadian society is entering into a new era, they argue, a post-Christian era. The end of Christendom, they argue, occurred in the closing decades of the 20th century as churches lost their social power and their place in the nation's cultural fabric. You know, this Sunday I'll be preaching at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Ottawa, and it's located literally across the street from the Supreme Court. And the $50 bill Prime Minister, William Lyon Mackenzie King, was a staunch supporter of that congregation. He also had the whole seance thing going on and talked to his dog, so we're not so keen on that. But they still have a plaque on the pew that the Prime Minister sat in that church, right? Whenever I'm there, I think, this is what Christendom memory looks like, right? Remembering when we were at the center of things. Now, other changes, of course, are afoot in the way that Canadians view Christianity, including in light of the church's participation, including the Presbyterian Church in Canada, in the residential schools program. A colleague of mine, a fellow missiologist named Sam Chase, observed this. Something is very different, he wrote, in the current Canadian zeitgeist compared to 130 years ago. There is a growing rejection of Christianity. Christianity is not seen as having a positive influence in the Canadian mosaic. The question being asked today is not whether Christianity is true, but whether it is good for Canada and for being human. And increasingly the answer is no. Now, Sam's usually not as doom and gloom as that, but I don't want to take it out of context. Recent research here in our region on the west coast of Canada has noted that we are likely not just speaking in terms of post-Christendom, the end of a privileged place of Christianity in Canadian culture, that pew of Prime Minister King in the church, for example, but we're moving into what might be properly called post-Christian, where we're encountering more people without any trace of a Christian background or working knowledge of the basic claims of the gospel. Scholars such as Lynn Marks from the University of Victoria, her book is pictured here on the left. If you're looking for a Christmas shopping list, there are some good ones on this screen. The print is too small to read the subtitle, but it's Irreligion and Religion in Settler British Columbia. And from her post as historian at the University of Victoria, she does a terrific job. It's such interesting reading. This was published by UBC Press, looking at Christianity in British Columbia and a little bit of the Yukon in the 19th century. And her argument is that Christendom was never fully established here on the West Coast. Why? This was a place that primarily young men made their way from Toronto the Good and other places in the East, leaving behind tradition, obligation, religious custom in order to make it rich fast. Gold rush, anyone, right? And with an extraction economy mindset to make money and go somewhere else, to not set down roots. Some might argue that that has continued to 2025. Most dinner parties I attend at some point in Vancouver, the conversation turns to real estate and when you're going to sell and get out, right? There is that kind of DNA that's been laid down. Now, Lynn Marks' PhD student, who went on to be the historian at Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops, Tina Block, published a follow-up study of the 20th century. And she expands to Washington State and looks at these dynamics of high secularity within our region. And so it's fascinating to see kind of the work that's being done here and some other work that has been done that I would commend to you. Paul Bramadat was part of a group at the University of Victoria who did a study, Religion at the Edge, where they look at spirituality in Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, and Victoria. It's a very good piece of work. The last one we will look at later. Now, that means then that if we are in a place here where fewer and fewer people came with a deep Christian faith, we need to attend to the impact of secularity, particularly here in our region. And of course, our own renowned Canadian philosopher and Roman Catholic, Charles Taylor, has helped us considerably understand this movement. Many of you have read Taylor's work. You'll know that his kind of thesis question, his curiosity is, how do we move in the West roughly over 500 years from a place in which most people identified as Christian to now one where Christianity is one option amongst many in the culture. And so the way that he works it in so many helpful ways is, he says, first of all, the movement of secularity was the product of the church itself, right? We, as Christians, we started to identify that there were certain holy people who would do holy things, and we would set them apart. And then there was the profane, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. You have sacred, you have holy, and you have secular and profane. And then, of course, secular too is really kind of what we often think about when it comes to secularity. And that's really a case where we say, okay, so fewer and fewer people attending church, Christianity no longer in the center, but we kind of have a sense of how that goes. I love Taylor's work, especially around secular 3, where he speaks in terms of we really live in an age of contested belief, where religious understanding is no longer the default of our Western human societies. Not believing in God and still having meaning in the immanent frame, the here and now, it's totally possible. In fact, it's common. And so exclusive humanism is a socially respectable and acceptable way of being in the world. If I was to flip back slides to the census takers slide here in British Columbia, no one in the 19th century would say they were an atheist. I mean, that was too far. So the census takers had all of these other categories they would use that essentially would kind of cover people off, right? They would slot them in. But now in this day and age, to say, well, I don't believe in anything, it's actually the norm. And I think for ministry leaders in British Columbia and the Yukon, it's a particular challenge for us because it's the conditions of faith themselves that seem to have changed. Let me give you an example of that. Feel bad for me. This is my daily commute back and forth to Bowen Island. And when the weather is good, I like to sit on the top deck. And as a missiologist, one of the things I love to do is to try and eavesdrop on conversation. I encourage you to do this as much as you can. I'm always interested, what are people talking about? Like today, everyone in the world is talking about Taylor Swift's new album. I know, right? Thanks for being here and not at home listening to it. And so I was on the top deck and listening to this conversation. It was two couples, and clearly one couple was here from Vancouver living. And I was trying to think, no, the other couple, from the way they're talking, they're visitors. I thought, this is typical for Bowen. They're bringing them over to show them Bowen on a day trip. And I heard the other couple identify they were from Ottawa. That's great. And the couple from Vancouver, no idea if they had a faith background or not. But the couple from Vancouver said, wow, when they looked at this scene, they said, isn't it beautiful? And the people from Ottawa said, yeah, it's so beautiful here. And the couple from Vancouver said, doesn't it just make you wonder, like, what's behind all of this? And my ears picked up at that point. And the other couple said, no, not really. It's just beautiful. I thought, wow, that's so interesting. Like in my tradition, our kind of big hero, he had his shadow side, is John Calvin. And Calvin, in his Institutes of the Christian Religion, describes nature, creation, as the theater of God's glory, right? Vancouverites and BC and Yukon folks get that, right? A walk in the woods, a hike in the mountains, the theater of God's glory. But Calvin also said, it is literally impossible for a human being human to look at the world and not consider that there's a creator behind it. It's inconceivable. Like, it's not possible for a human being to do that. And I don't say this often, but I'll say it tonight. John Calvin was wrong, because in 2025, it's entirely possible to look at the world around and to see beauty alone. I find that personally fascinating. So the survey I showed you earlier stopped at the 2011 census. I thought you might be interested at having a look at the 2021 census, the latest data that we have on how Canadians are reporting to the government their religious affiliation. Particularly, I have another slide on multi-faith coming, but this is specifically Christian. Now, scholars in the room will be ready to jump to their feet, so I have to add a little caveat. Let us remember that when the census is sent out, people are self-identifying. This is not tied to A, membership, or B, levels of participation, right? So you may not have been at a Salvation Army service in like 30 years, but you still check Salvation Army because the thought of your grandmother kind of comes to your mind. So we don't really know, but it's still telling for the fact that people are no longer choosing a Christian identity, right? And so you can see from coast to coast, every province, every territory in 1 decade reports percentage of fewer people identifying as Christian. And as you'll see, we love to be winners, don't we? And so British Columbia and Yukon were winners. We are the most secular parts of the country as far as we have the fewest people who self-identify. I don't actually think that's winning, but there you go. You get the prize. When you think about it, 6 point something of folks that you pass on the streets in British Columbia do not identify as Christian. Let's have a look at the next slide that helps us figure out that kind of lovely teal color. That's the same stats, should be the same stats that you had on the last slide. Those are folks who identify as Christian. But the blue is folks who have told the government, you know what, no, like I checked the box, religion, what? I don't have a religion. No religion is their category. And then the orange is other religions, other world religions. So you can see in the Yukon, 59.7% say they have no religion. I'd love to know after friends visiting from the Yukon whether that surprises you or not. 52.1%, the majority of British Columbians tell the census takers, I have no religious expression. Like, that is remarkable. Growing up in Manitoba, that is still nominally a majority Christian, like, that would be inconceivable to me, right? I still remember Mrs. Duncan, my fierce grade 3 teacher, a ruling elder in the local Presbyterian church, would read the New Testament and lead us in the Lord's Prayer, even after the Manitoba government said that she couldn't do it anymore. She still did it anyway. She was close to retirement, right? The Gideons coming in handing out Bibles. Everyone in my class was something, Roman Catholic, Ukrainian Catholic, Presbyterian, Baptist, Lutheran, United, Anglican, and then the rest were Mennonite because it was Winnipeg, right? So the thought that we could be living in a society now where the majority of folks say they have no religious expression is absolutely fascinating to me. Now, you may be interested, okay, hold on, Ross, so those who do say they're Christian in the 2021 census, how does that break down? Well, it won't be any surprise. I mean, almost since Canada was Canada, the majority of Christians in our country identify as Roman Catholic. And then from there, the breakdown is interesting to note that the growing number beyond Roman Catholic is those who simply check Christian. They actually don't want to even say a denomination. And one of the things in my own mainline Protestant world that people note is the assumption is always like the Pentecostals are huge, like they're just massive, but statistically not true. So these are some interesting kind of stats for us to have a look at. Okay, I've thrown a lot at you there to kind of try and paint a coast-to-coast understanding of the changing nature of religious affiliation in Canada. Now comes the first time for you to do some good work in small groups. And please, this is not just busy work, because I've got so much I could lecture for hours, but it was intentional on the part of all of us. We want to collect some data tonight. We want to know what's going on in your diocese and in your parishes. And so the first question that you have before you, and first of all, show of hands, who needs a sheet of paper? Did someone not get one in? Nick is very spry and he can run around and hand out paper. You all have paper. Does anyone need a pen? Some folks need pens. And I think you get to keep them. I don't know, I shouldn't say that. I may have spoken out of turn. but I love free stuff. So Nick, just hold your hand up. Nick's going to run around. Here's what I'd love for you to engage. You've seen all this, the stats that I've put up. Where do you see evidence in your community of what we might call this post-Christendom, post-Christian reality? Can you give like an example? Can you tell us a story, for example, of encountering a thoroughly secular person? And if you're struggling with that, I will give you a concrete example. I was in beautiful Kamloops, British Columbia. That is such a beautiful city, such a beautiful part of our province, to preach at St. Andrew's Presbyterian, where my good friend Steve Phillick is the pastor. And I was a little shaggy. I'm a little shaggy tonight. This is shaggy for me. I like short hair. So I went to a barber shop before preaching. And I had a very cool barber. She was like very hipster with tattoos. She had like a cool neck tattoo and stuff. I thought, oh, this is good. And I sat down and put the little thing on and all that kind of stuff. And then comes the question. And priests and deacons in the room, you know this question, the what do you do question. And some of us cringe, like, oh, we'll see how this goes. So I said, well, I'm a minister. And she kind of looked at me strangely and she said, like, Ministry of Natural Resources? I'm like, yeah, no. And I thought, oh, she's joking, right? I'm like, yeah, no, a minister, a pastor, like a Christian minister, nothing. And I'm sitting there and she has very sharp implements around my head. And I start doing like, you know those buildings in town that have a cross on them? Like, it was painful. She said, oh, yeah, I've been past those. And like just a thoroughly secular person here in British Columbia. Do you have evidence in your own communities of this kind of change? Take a few minutes and then I'll call you back together. All right, invite us to come back together. And if you haven't had a chance to jot down some answers on your sheets, I invite you to do so at this time. Nick has kindly agreed to I was going to say play Phil Donahue, but that reference doesn't work at all anymore. I thank you so much to carry the microphone around. We're just curious, as organizers, we're curious just to have a little bit of feedback after these 3 discussion times. What bubbled up for you? Does someone have a short kind of concrete example of the end of Christendom, of encountering a thoroughly secular person? Just raise your hand, and Nick is like a marathon runner, sprinter. He'll come to you in like half a second.
I will.
Indeed. Right here.
Felix.
Thank you.
You don't probably even need a mic, but we'll give it to you.
Yeah, that's it. My name is Felix. I'm practicing Roman Catholic, and this is my parish and church.
Nice.
And I was just sharing that I have this riddle, if you will, of I have 2 sons, and my older son, who is absolutely, he's brilliant. I say that with
You
some
have to.
prejudice.
You have to.
Yeah, right. But has decided a long time ago that he wants to do good things, and he does not need the church to do that.
Right. Yeah.
So he picked up that attitude when he went away to Toronto for an undergraduate, and he came back, and he is really a generous and a good person.
I'm sure.
But he is spiritual,
Yeah.
not Christian.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good example. Thank you for sharing that. And we can blame everything on Toronto. It's true. Yes. Another example of the end of Christendom in your parish setting, your diocese, perhaps an encounter with a thoroughly secular person.
Yeah, I'm Father Davide. I work in the seminary. I'm director of the Redemptoris Mother Seminary.
Thank you.
I went one day to just renew my license to ICBC driver license place, and they have to take a picture of you.
Yeah.
And the person that was there by the counter, she looked at me. I was wearing my collar.
Yes.
And she looked at me and she told me, "Wow, that's really a nice shirt. Where did you buy it?" What's that thing that you have there? What that's nice. I want one too.
That is such a great example. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's so good. That is so good. I have to wear my clergy collar more often then. That's good. I like it. Time for one more.
Yeah.
These are good examples. You notice I put some over here. We have a hand. Oh, great.
We're gonna get you next time.
Sure.
Hey, I'm Miriam. I'm from the Yukon.
Nice. Yay. Thanks for coming.
I was telling the story to my group for just last weekend. It was my daughter's birthday party.
Yeah.
And we had some friends over with their parents. And we
Nice.
have a crucifix in our living room.
Right. Yeah.
And a little girl, she's 10 years old, was asking me, what is that? Why do you have a hanging dead person in your living room? And so my daughter said, oh, that's Jesus.
Yeah.
How could you not know Jesus?
Yeah.
And the little girl was, oh, I don't know what that is. But the mother asked, actually, it's a good question. I was also wondering why you have a dead man hanging in your living room. And the second mother, same thing. They had never seen the cross with the corpus. One of them knew that there was a cross with some kind of religious symbol.
Right.
But with the body of Christ on it, they really didn't know. They didn't know anything. So it was a very difficult question to answer from no background at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the Yukon.
Another great example. Yeah, when you think about this slide here, 59.7%, 60% of the people that you're bumping into on a daily basis, no religion. And many, not all, but many of them would be like that with actually no interpretive lens on the story of the gospel. We're going to recall that example and a few others when we get to our next breakout group, which is actually not that far away. What I wanted to do was to set a few questions before you. I think all of them include Roman Catholic parishes in BC or the Yukon. So this is like spin the wheel, name the parish as we do this. I'd love to have you think a little bit about your own practice of ministry in your parish, in your diocese, and answer these questions either in your head or you can jot down some answers. We're going to see them not in rapid fire, but we're going to move through them at a good clip. First one that is clearly our beautiful cathedral downtown here in Vancouver. What works here? And by here I mean wherever home is for you. When you think back over the past, let's say 5 years, what is the most effective form of mission, like a best practice that your parish has used, your congregation has reached people in the parish, in the community? So can you think back over 5 years? Was there a program? Was there a special mass? Was there something that you'd like to lift up and say, you know what, I didn't know if this was going to work, but we did it, and it was remarkable. Like, it really worked at connecting with young families, singles, newcomers to the community, seniors in the community. Was there one best practice? Kind of tuck that away, write that one down, because you're going to need that later on when we get to our discussion group. The next one, I believe this is your beautiful church in Prince George. Ours is right across the street from the hospital. I've been up there several times. A couple of our grads are serving it. Who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? What is the most significant difference? That could be anything: age, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, between the people who are part of your local church and those who you encounter outside of the church daily in your neighborhood. I'll give you an example of this. When I go to preach, I guess preach most Sundays in different churches, I'm always nervous of getting to a church late. It's like a preacher's dilemma, right? So even tonight, I want to make sure Nick saw me, the speaker's here. And so I get to a neighborhood early where I'm going to preach, and I find a coffee shop of some kind and go over my sermon. But I also look at who's coming and going on a Sunday morning in the coffee shop, and I'm looking for who lives in this neighborhood. What's the dominant ethnicity? Are there children present? Is it mostly seniors? What's the socioeconomic profile? And I take a mental snapshot, click, and then a few minutes later I walk into the church where I'm going to preach, and I look around and I ask, what's different here? Does this local church, does it reflect the community, or is it vastly different from? So think about that for your own parish that you serve. Let's think about partnerships. Who are the partners in the wider community, faith-based or otherwise, that your church works with to achieve your mission? Can you name 1, 2, 3, 4 other partners? And if it's all Catholic charities, that's amazing. That's wonderful. But can you push a little further? Are there other partners in the wider community? Some of them listed here, North Okanagan Hospice Society, for example. Are there other partners that you work with? If you can't identify others, that may be a place of curiosity for you in your relationships in the wider community. There's another question to mull over. Celebrating God's faithfulness. When you pray for your local parish, what do you give God thanks for today? What do you celebrate when you think in terms of your local parish? How would you answer that question? And then seeking God's wisdom. When you pray for your local parish, what do you ask God to help your priest and key lay leaders with? When you're praying for your church, when you're opening your heart to God, what are you setting before God as a desire that you would see God do? How might God help your priest, your other lay leaders within the parish? And then last but not least, discerning God's presence. If you had to prove the existence of God, where would you take me as your visitor? First of all, in your local congregation. Say, Ross, I want to take you downstairs. I want to take you to our food bank ministry. Every Tuesday, this place is full of our neighbors and we feed them. I see God at work there. Or I want to take you into the church hall and show you where we feed people in this community, or where we have church gatherings together, or into a study area where we are learning more about our Catholic faith. And then where would you take me outside of your church building? Where would you take me in the community to prove God's existence? Now that language is a bit, maybe to celebrate God's existence and presence. Where would you name within the broader community? So these things are percolating in your mind. There are three key questions when I meet with local congregations, often on a Saturday retreat, and work through some of these changes that are taking place in Canadian society. I'd love for you, this is going to form our next breakout group. The three questions are why Jesus, why church, and why this church? Now, the first question, you can laugh me out of the room and say, come on, Ross, why Jesus? I mean, we're faithful Christian leaders. Really, do I need to answer this? Except we just had the most beautiful example from the Yukon. Who is that man, that dead man up there on the wall? Why Jesus? Why does Jesus matter in this world and in people's lives? What difference would you say, like in your own words, does knowing, loving, serving, and following Jesus make in your life and the lives of those in the congregation? Maybe the Roman Catholic Church has done a better job than the Protestant world, but mainline Protestantism in Canada from the 1960s on has been a bit woeful at times in our work of catechesis, of actually helping people form a thick description of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. And that includes articulating Christian faith, why Jesus matters. Central to our faith is the risen and ascended Lord Jesus Christ. So why Jesus? If you were in that living room at that birthday party, how would you answer the question about who is that dead man on the wall? As you're enjoying your cake, or was it cupcakes? What did you have? Ice cream, even better. Fantastic. So why Jesus? Mull that over in your small group discussion. The next one, you can also roll your eyes and say, I can't believe I turned out to hear Ross speak when I ask you to work on the question, why church? You say, why church? Well, of course church. If you follow Jesus, you go to church. Except it's not true anymore. Cardis has worked with Angus Reid, someone who I've been here for your spectacular convocation ceremonies when Angus Reid was recognized by St. Mark's, and they've polled Canadians. And there's a category that's emerging that I find really intriguing that's known as privately faithful. Privately faithful. And these are folks for whom they'll express a belief in God, but the desire to actually attend religious services or to be a part of a religious community, it's not a priority for them. In fact, they probably don't. And I think, check this with your own experience, I would say after the global pandemic, that has increased as many people have gotten used to not attending worship services. So why church? I do think, as Christian leaders, it falls to us to articulate why not just believing in God and Jesus Christ as we know him, but why active involvement in a local parish actually matters. So even if one believes in God, why does active participation in a local congregation matter? And beyond just some sense of duty, how would you describe the importance and necessity of belonging to a church community? Can you get those same things somewhere else in society, right? There have been some fascinating studies done on the religious nature of CrossFit studios, right? Where people share community, where they have baby dedication ceremonies. People get married in CrossFit studios. Can you imagine how bad the smell would be attending a wedding? Like, no thanks. So there are other places that people gather for meaning and belonging in our Canadian society. Why Jesus? Why church? And if you have time, I hope you get around to this question of why this church. Describe your local parish. And this is in a non-competitive way compared to other churches in your community. If I had a wish, cheesy Christian competition would just disappear. I can't stand it. Instead, this question is more about, like, name the charisms of your particular parish. What is it about your parish that you celebrate, that you would actually be eager to tell other people about? This is why I belong here. Not just delighted, I'm so proud to be a Roman Catholic, but this particular parish really is special for me in this season of my life because blank. Why Jesus? Why church? Why this church? Please take a few minutes in your small groups to discuss those questions. All right, I invite you to come back together. I hope your small group has been as good as mine up here at the front. It's been really good conversation. You can see 2 bullet points on the screen and a rather handsome-looking Sherlock Holmes. So that the rapid-fire series of questions that I gave you, maybe you had a chance to discuss some of them. We got to some of them in our small group as well. They're really designed to help you kind of be attuned to divine presence in the midst of our everyday, ordinary lives. I think that is a challenge, particularly in an increasingly secular Canadian landscape, to have eyes and ears to see what God is up to in the broader world. Vancouver-based missiologist Alan Roxburgh describes that being a detective of divinity, which is a great phrase, like with Sherlock Holmes and the magnifying, being on the lookout for where God is at work. So when I ask you questions like, if you had to prove the existence of God in your local church or your community, where would you take me? That's you being very much attentive to where you see the nature of God, the character of God at work through human beings. I hope you also had a chance to get to those 3 questions: why Jesus, why church, why this church? A chance to feedback on either one of those 2 bullet points, and Nick will spring to his feet like a gazelle and bring you the microphone.
Any thoughts, comments?
Susan at the very back. Well done. Good thing Nick is fit.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. Thank you. My name is Susan Silvera, and that's my husband, Jude Silvera. We belong to Our Lady of Mercy Parish in South Burnaby.
Lovely.
And I work for St. Thomas More. It's a high school from grade 8 to 12.
Nice.
And why Jesus and why church and why this church? And go back to why this church. Because Jude and I, we go to Our Lady of Mercy Parish and encounter Christ in there. And as we come out of that church, we see the demographics of that church has changed over since 1997 when I joined there.
Wow.
Different people, people from different nations are in that church.
Yeah.
And I identify myself in there. First of all, identifying myself as a Christian. And secondly, identifying me as a different person from different part of the world.
Yeah.
I come from India, and Judea comes from Pakistan. We are both countries at war with each other. But we fell in love and we got married.
Lovely.
So anyways, that's not the point, but I find...
It's a great story, though. I'm glad.
Coming to the point why this church, I identify myself in that church because I meet people from different nations.
Beautiful.
And from different nations that have a love for Christ. Different demographics, different faith, different cultures, but of the same faith.
That's wonderful.
So when we come out of the church, if we have seen couples, that if we have seen once or twice or 3 times for that mass, the 3rd time they will not go out of the church without encountering us.
Yeah, lovely.
So we stand there and we wait.
Yeah.
And then they come out of the church and we say, "Are you new to this parish?"
Yeah.
And they say, "Yes, we are new."
Yeah.
"Okay, I'm Susan, this is my husband Jude.
Yeah.
Let's encounter you with our phone numbers. If you need any help, we are here. If you are not new and you have been in this church for like 5 years, 6 years, and you have not been noticed, we'll notice you."
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that example and a really beautiful way to articulate why your local parish matters. That's a really beautiful example. And I'm glad you're still happily married too. That's beautiful. That's great. It's encouraging. Other reactions, feedback to these 2 kind of categories? Hand up there.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Andy from Kamloops.
Nice.
And I think the question of why Jesus, I would argue that Protestants are way better at answering that than Catholics. And how you mentioned how Protestants haven't really been good at catechesis. We have a book.
Yeah.
Like, we're really good at catechesis.
Right.
I would argue that. Maybe we're not good at teaching it, but we have it. But what we aren't good at is when we get asked why Jesus.
Yeah.
Because he changed my life. Jesus changed my life, otherwise I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, amen.
And I have a testimony about it. Maybe we don't have time to share it, but we can't express that. We might know it, but we can't use words to express it. Whereas if we did, then everything else would follow, right? That's why I liked how you had why Jesus, why church, and why this church. Because that's the perfect priorities. Like I said, we're really good at catechesis. We're really good at saying Catholics are pro-life, and you're not a good Catholic unless you're pro-life. Well, really? You might, but do you know Jesus?
Right.
Tell me who Jesus is. He's the guy on the cross, on the thing.
Yeah.
Well, is that enough?
Yeah.
It's not enough.
Thank you very much. I think that there is something, just like we've heard now, 2 examples of people who can articulate why their Christian faith means something deep to them. Reminds me of the former president of Fuller Seminary, a PCUSA minister. He has a book entitled Called, and he describes shaking hands after church on a Sunday, and a guy comes up to him who he doesn't recognize and says, "Hey, maybe you're new here, welcome." He said, "Yeah, Pastor, thanks, I've been coming here a few weeks." He said, "Look, I'm trying to get my life sorted out. I haven't had a great life and trying to go to church, and can you help me? I'm kind of confused. I've gone to some churches and they talk a lot about Jesus, and that's good, but they say like nothing about the world or how to change it. Go to other churches, they talk all about the world and what's wrong with it. It's kind of exhausting, and they never talk about Jesus. I've come to your church for like 3 weeks and you seem to talk about both." And the author wrote, he was feeling good about himself. And at that point, the guy says, "So, Pastor, if I keep coming back to your church, will I meet people like Jesus?" And then he said he didn't feel very good because he was shaking the guy's hand. He was looking over his shoulder thinking, "I hope he doesn't speak to that lady because she has like crazy conspiracy theories, or that guy because he's really mean, that kind of thing, right? So how is it that our parishes are showing evidence of lives that have been changed by Jesus? A time for maybe one more question, and then we'll move into our final section. Oh, making you stretch it out. Yeah. Thanks, Nick.
Well, regarding the question, why this church?
Yeah.
Very simple, succinct answer is because of the apostolic succession.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. I like that. And I think what would be interesting would to sit down with someone for whom they do not have a Christian background, and they'd say, wow, I don't know what that means. Tell me what that means, right? And then you're into a conversation, right? So yeah, very good. Okay, so we're going to land the plane, so to speak, looking at some recent research that I've done here on Vancouver. If you are with us tonight from the interior or the north or the island or the Yukon, please don't tune out at this point, because my hunch from sharing some of this material in other places is that you'll identify with much of what I discovered in churches here in Vancouver. We do live in a, at times, obnoxiously beautiful place, as you can see here. I really like the banner of St. Mark's, the "You Are Here," and the fact that it has gorgeous mountains behind. That's a good recruitment tool as well. I like that. As a missiologist, I'm driven by a particular question, and that is, I spend many waking hours and some sleeping, mulling over the question, what in the world is God up to? And I mean that as a literal question. I'm driven by a curiosity of trying to discern what God and Jesus Christ is up to in the world. And so as a result, I focused a lot on local expressions of Christianity in some publications, some that Nick kindly mentioned earlier. And for me, there's really this sense of trying to get a handle on what Christianity looks like and what are people wrestling with in this particular region. In the research project that I'm going to describe to you, I drew on some other really good research that's been done in this region that I'll comment on briefly as we go forward. The main one is a dear friend of mine, Christopher James, and he is a fellow professor of mission at Dubuque Seminary in the States. It's an American Presbyterian seminary, sibling school to my own. And he did a study of church plants in Seattle, Washington, that was published by Oxford Press. And that was his opportunity to try and figure out, in a highly secular city like Seattle, we were commenting in our small group, when you cross the border to Washington State, you can feel Christianity more than in Canada, because that's just American culture. But Seattle itself, of course, is quite a secular city. So he looked at new expressions of church plants in Seattle, and I drew some of my work from his. This was the main question that certainly guided my own curiosity, and that was, how are Christians in Vancouver today, as a minority expression of the majority secular population, organizing their communities, shaping their beliefs, and expressing themselves in mission? When I describe minority-majority, that's simply statistically true. Within the city of Vancouver, all the way back in the 2011 census, and even more so in the 2021 census, the number of residents who declare themselves to be Christian of any variety is a minority compared to the majority of our fellow Vancouverites who tells StatsCan, I have no religion whatsoever. And so we know that there are certain characteristics of the place that we call home, right? And place is important. Familiarity with place is important. And so as I began my research project, I had curiosities about how Christians, for example, were engaging Vancouverites' clear expression and high value that is placed upon the natural world, right? How do Christians see that? How do they try and connect their faith to that? What does it mean to be in an urban setting that still values the natural world? I did some background work that actually included statistical analysis, a survey sent out to somewhere around 100 Christian leaders, some Roman Catholic in the city. And from that data, it didn't end up in the book that I've published. It's coming out in a separate chapter in a book that Brill is publishing this year. But some of the work that I did on that was looking at a historical perspective of Vancouver, globalization and immigration and the huge impact that that has on our city, economic realities, which, you know, after a while you just get used to Vancouver, but boy, we have some challenges that are unlike other places. The fact that, you know, we have a secular and a liberal political culture, right? That just floats in the air here. I looked at environmental and indigenous concerns, and urbanization and isolation, as well as, of course, the ecclesial dimension. Who is present? Who are the Christian churches that are present? If it helps to get a sense of the methodology of the work that I did, I engaged with 14 churches that I'll show you on a slide coming up. But I had a fourfold way of engaging. The first was an extensive review of the online presence of the Christian churches and organizations that I studied. So detailed reading of their website, listening to podcasts. Of course, the best Christian podcast in the city is done by John Martins here at St. Mark's College. And looking at their social media. I remember being really impressed by your cathedral's social media presence as I was studying that as one of the sites, and live streaming opportunities to engage. The second was what I called a walking interview with the priest or the pastor whenever possible to be out in the neighborhood around the local congregation to get a sense of how the leadership viewed the world around the church. It's quite telling, right? To listen carefully to the way in which a ministry leader describes their own parish. Is it a place that is just bursting with possibility? Is it a place in which they see that God's revelation is around every corner? Or do they see the neighborhood as a dark place, right? In which my doctorator, Stefan Paas, would call when Christians look at the world outside the church as a black canvas on which Satan paints. It's quite dramatic language, right? If you've ever been in those kinds of churches, you know that feeling, right? We're holy in here and everyone out there is bad, you know, that kind of thing. So listening for the way in which the world around the church is being described. The reason it's important to listen to how the leader describes the world is that will work its way into homilies, into the way in which the budget is used and so forth, right? It has an impact. I was delighted to spend time in focus groups with roughly 5 to 7 lay people in each of the 14 sites. Really intriguing. I had an interview guide I'll show you in a couple of minutes just to give you a sense of the questions that I was asking them. And then participant observation exercises in worship and other social gatherings. All in the attempt to develop what sociologists would call a thick description of Christianity in Vancouver. So you might be wondering, okay, where did I go? I had different categories. I had 7 categories. Church plants, mainline Protestant congregations, what I called multi-site evangelical congregations. So those were churches that would have a central hub, kind of a 10th church model, a tapestry model here. If you're from Vancouver, you may be familiar with those churches. Ethnic specific congregations. Neighborhood focused. These are churches that are known for particular emphasis upon the theology of place. So an example would be Pastor Trevor at a First Christian Reformed Church in East Vancouver is located right next door to the Refugee Support Council for Vancouver. They have a beautiful brand new building that includes housing and day programs for refugees. They're like literally next door to this brand new building. And so that church mulled over what was God saying to them by, if they're supposed to share the gospel with their neighbor, that's literally their neighbor. So their presbytery, or what they call a classis, helped fund a refugee chaplain. And they dug up their backyard and created a community garden because they found by engaging the refugee neighbors that most of them came from rural places in Syria and Afghanistan, and now they were plunked down in the middle of Canada's third largest city. And so they would have people coming across. The language was a barrier, but they could farm together, they could garden, and then the produce was given away $1 a bag or whatever, that kind of thing. So really tight in the community. Catholic Orthodox, pleasure of spending time studying Holy Rosary, Roman Catholic Cathedral, and St. Gregory the Illuminator, Armenian Apostolic Church. I don't know if you know of this church, but it's a remarkable story. During the Syrian crisis, they sponsored over 1,000 Syrian refugees. One church. It's not a big church. Now, they ended up co-sponsoring with a lot of people, but it's a remarkable congregation. And part of the study there was in conversation with the priest and the lay people to note the new arrivals, many of them Christians from Syria, their pious approach to the faith and their devotion that kind of showed up some of the Vancouver-born Orthodox folks and their kind of lack of zeal. And that was creating what the priest described as a good tension within their parish. It was fascinating. And then 2 Christian parachurch agencies, if you're not aware of these, I commend them to you. Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries is now an international ministry, but founded here in Vancouver and still based in Vancouver. And they even have almost like there's a Catholic tailored Alpha program. There's a Sanctuary Mental Health tailored Catholic program as well. And Jacob's Well is a community, not just an outreach ministry, but a community in the downtown east side. As I was engaging these churches in fieldwork, that will look like an eye exam, by the way, so you won't be able to read that. But some of the questions that I asked you in our last round were from this interview guide. Who are the partners in the wider community that your church works with to achieve your mission? One of the ones I didn't give you was, tell me a story about a time that you discussed your Christian faith with someone in Vancouver outside your local church. What happened, and how did the other person respond? That was fascinating to hear, how Christians were engaging their neighbor. In your experience, describe what values or beliefs Vancouverites have in common, whether they are Christian or not. What helps or hinders you when it comes to sharing your Christian beliefs with others in Vancouver? Given Vancouverites' identified value for Indigenous culture as well as its corresponding environmental values, how might Christians better engage this emphasis upon First Nations and creation for the sake of Christian mission? So we had some really fascinating conversations. They were semi-structured interviews for the purpose that if the conversation went a certain way, we could just follow where the Spirit was leading. But some really good data came out of that experience. What ended up coming out of the coding process was 7 kind of key themes, and I'm going to walk through these briefly one by one, and then give you a chance to mull these over, especially as you're kind of bouncing these off your own experience of Christian leadership and participation in your home parish. Befriending a spiritual but not religious culture and the challenges therein. Affordable housing as a missional connection, discerning models of Christian witness, good news in light of troubling colonial history, the changing face of Christianity in Vancouver, what I coded as scarce sacred space, and ecology and theology. So first of all, this category of befriending a spiritual but not religious culture. Interview subjects repeatedly noted that the spiritual but not religious mindset of their friends, neighbors, and coworkers, who acknowledged a general kind of nature-based spirituality, but resisted any kind of dogmatic expression of faith, was a challenge. One person in a focus group said this: meditation, yoga, and finding yourself in the mountains is everywhere. People are basically agnostic, not atheist, and they don't have any sense of being rooted in a tradition here in Vancouver. Now here the research I did echoed the findings of Elaine Graham in the United Kingdom, who describes the growing number of those who identify as spiritual but not religious as an emergent new form of religious expression, markedly more heterodox and personalized. Recent research in the region has stated the challenge more bluntly. And this comes from Sarah Wilkins Laflamme, who is a sociologist of religion at the University of Waterloo, who's done work in this area. She writes this: Cascadians do not consider organized religion a necessary part of their lives. The challenge seemed to be, for many people interviewed, in how best to share the gospel with those in the city who had this spiritual but not religious mindset. And they would engage a little bit in conversation, but often kind of shut down and show no interest when someone started to express the particularity of Christianity. It was a category that I've kind of come to call affable agnostic. I think a lot of Christians in Vancouver, when I pushed them, they believed that people around them were kind of hardcore atheists, but actually very few are. It's more this just kind of sense of vagueness. And the phrase that kept coming back in the focus groups was Vancouverites, when they would encounter a strong Christian presence, they wouldn't condemn it. They would default to language like, you do you. That's great, that works for you, but I'm good, right? So this was one of the challenges. I think one of the takeaways from this first category was that people reported that where they did see some fruit in going deeper in conversation was in one of two areas. The first, which I found interesting, was in neighbors, family, friends, co-workers, even strangers who were members of another world religion. That if they had a Jewish neighbor, a Muslim coworker, they were more than happy to talk about faith. There was no hesitation. But it was folks who identified kind of as secular that often were most resistant. And then that second piece would be where there was a sense of fruit, even with folks who were secular. It was through long time, long established, deep friendships and relationships, right? So again, not treating the other as object, but as subject of encounter, right? And so, in other words, evangelistic witness without a pre-existing friendship or relationship did not seem to be effective for many in my survey and in my study. The second category that I've coded was affordable housing as a missional connection. I mean, it doesn't take long, right, to be in conversation here in Vancouver before real estate comes up and the cost of housing. Housing is a major social issue affecting the quality of life for so many here in our city. And from time to time, Vancouver is ranked the third most, second most, fourth most expensive in the city. I'm not sure we ever want to be the most, or in the world, I should say. I don't think we ever want to be kind of in the leader of the pack there. And so people reported affordable housing as a challenge and how the church had a responsibility to try and respond in some way by supporting organizations that are actually doing something around the cost of living and so forth. I think part of the challenge was that people recognized that even the question of what is affordable now in Vancouver is a question mark, right? Like, you know, if you need more than a six-figure salary to qualify for affordable housing, what does that mean for many people at the lower kind of scale? So affordable housing, I could get more into this, but as you can imagine, people were identifying this as where their faith was meeting a real need, that they could actually articulate to me as a researcher, Ross, this is something that I'm passionate about. I wish my church could do more, or my church is doing something about it. The example up here on the bottom left, Cohere Housing, was a successful building project of Grandview Church in East Vancouver, turning their parking lot into an affordable housing complex. Discerning models of Christian witness. I mentioned earlier that I built my research upon my colleague Chris James, his work in Seattle, where he focused on church plants. And in that work, he developed 4 models of Christian communities, what he called Great Commission team-themed churches, and you can see the definition of those there. Household of the Spirit, more charismatic churches. New Community, those were often kind of mainline Protestant churches. And then non-denominational churches, which of course are growing, that he called neighborhood incarnational. And those would be evangelistic in kind of witness, but deeply rooted in a commitment to justice, and always with a theology of place. It was always neighborhood-based, right? So not big denominations, but kind of a church for the neighborhood. In many ways, James focused on the particular kinds of community in these churches, but they were all Protestant churches. So I had kind of expanded, including Catholic, Orthodox, and parachurch, in addition simply to church plants. But similar to James's findings, the Vancouver data offered evidence of a strong emphasis upon community and belonging, with many of the initiatives studied reflecting characteristics of this neighborhood incarnational model, as St. Peter's Fireside, First CRC, Tapestry Marble. As one focus group participant said, what helps is our deep Christian community in this city that has a loneliness epidemic. People see what we have and they think, hey, I need some of that too. Some of the sites visited reflected a shared emphasis upon welcome, hospitality, and community, and those were more in kind of the new community model. But the data in that I had to work with really suggested that neighborhood incarnational, that last question, why this church, that you wrestled with, right? Being able to articulate, why are we in this neighborhood with this particular ministry at this time, was something that a lot of the churches in the study were working on. The next area will not surprise you at all, and that is that there was a real challenge within the ministerial leadership interviewed and in the focus groups, trying to come to terms with the fact that when they would say that they're Christian now, a lot of people would be able to articulate the errors of mission past, or the impact, especially upon Indigenous peoples, and particularly through residential schools. So while Christians, of course, seek to share the gospel with neighbors in Vancouver, the research identified the difficulty of communicating the good news of Christianity in light of the bad news of colonial mission history, increasingly profiled in the Canadian media. Pastors and lay people interviewed in this project consistently named the troubled history of Canadian churches and Indigenous peoples as a significant stumbling block for sharing the gospel with Vancouverites. As one focus group participant said to me, when I try to share my faith, I usually start off with something lighthearted, like, oh, this weekend I'm going to church. Do you go to church? But people tell me, no, I hate the church. How do you respond to that? She asked, right? And this person went on to name negative depictions of Christianity in the media and so forth. I think one of the things that I found really encouraging, though, in this section was how seriously people were taking the need for reconciliation. Right across the theological spectrum, right across the denominational spectrum, there was a sense in which being honest about the church's impact in negative ways was a way forward for witness, not trying to somehow minimize it or defend it, but being able to kind of show the wounded scars of the church as a form of testimony. The changing face of Vancouver was evident throughout the entire study. And so rooted in the familiar secularization thesis, Many have assumed that Christianity is in steep decline in Vancouver, as those with European Christendom heritage have ended any formal association with organized religion, from regular church-going to rites of passage such as Christian baptisms, weddings, or funerals, hatch, match, and dispatch, as we heard in my small group. For these Vancouverites, when they or their parents moved to the west coast of Canada, they left behind whatever Christian faith they may have once practiced. And so there's really this sense of wonderment now when we actually look at what God is doing in the church in Vancouver, and that is that the church is being renewed from outside of Canada in many ways. And when I looked at the field of study that I had, it was fascinating to see how every church in Christian ministry in the sample was being impacted positively by new Canadians and new Christians. So even mainline Protestant churches, the diversity that was present in the sample was impressive. In addition to that, in the focus group discussions, there was evidence that Vancouver Christians from a non-European heritage, they actually felt that they had an advantage in sharing the gospel with their non-Christian neighbors, including Indigenous peoples. Many of those interviewed identified that they moved to Vancouver from places where Christianity is a minority and sometimes a persecuted expression, right? Places like China, Indonesia, and so forth. And they described this as an advantage in engaging in Christian witness and mission. Canadian sociologist of religion like Joel Thiessen at Ambrose University in Calgary, he has done some recent amazing work on Roman Catholicism in Calgary that you should read. They're beginning to take note of this shift when he writes this. Truth be told, levels of individual secularization would likely be worse if it were not for immigration. Immigration keeps Canadian identification, belief, and practice afloat, notably in Roman Catholic and conservative Protestant settings. So in some ways what I try to do is problematize the assumption that the church in Vancouver is just in decline. I think really what we're talking about is its decline and change at the same time, right? And you can focus on one and miss the other. And when you're thinking in terms of the work you're going to do tomorrow, I'd encourage you to think in terms of where are you seeing that renewal, often surprising renewal. Almost done, almost to the discussion time. Here's another point, scarce sacred space, scarce sacred space. A significant finding in the study is that a particular challenge for Christian communities in Vancouver is in connection with finding and maintaining ecclesiastical meeting and service space. Given that Vancouver is home to some of the most expensive real estate in the world, the fieldwork highlighted the dilemma of faithful stewardship of property for those churches who are fortunate to have buildings, and the ongoing challenge of immigrant churches and church plants new to the city who cannot find a place to gather for worship and service. As Canadian church planter Kevin Malkins noted of Canada's largest cities, quote, "The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation has said that Canada is on track to close over 9,000 sacred buildings in the next decade, roughly 1/3 of all of our religious spaces." And in what Philip Sheldrake calls sacramentality, a material sign of God's action in human lives, the question remains about the visibility of the Christian community, at least in the form of ecclesiastical buildings, when one of the major challenges to life in Vancouver is affordable real estate. And so throughout my study, I heard people expressing struggle, right? A number of the church plants in the study, they had to keep changing their address every year or every 2 years. They just kept being bumped, right? From a church they were renting that was sold and turned into condos. Then they were meeting at the Museum of Vancouver. Then they were back into an art gallery. Like they were just all over the place because they could not find a consistent space to meet. And as we all know, the dilemma then is for those of us that do have property in Vancouver, when it's sold, it will probably never again be rezoned for religious assembly space, right? What secular politician in the right mind would give a tax break to a religious group, right? They want the tax income. So it behooves us to be careful with what we do, the stewardship of our property. Finally, ecology and theology. As noted throughout the study, Vancouverites place a high social value on both the care for the physical environment as well as enjoyment of the same. Some commentators on religion in the city, such as Vancouver Sun newspaper columnist Douglas Todd, have even gone as far as to call environmentalism Vancouver's commonly held civic religion, or what Philip Sheldrake calls the soul of the city. From Vancouver as the birthplace of the environmental activist organization Greenpeace, to the stunning beauty of oceans and mountains captured by the tourist board's slogan, super comma natural, British Columbia, right? We've split the divine with a comma, to the limitless outdoor recreation opportunities. It's clear that Vancouverites' engagement with the environment is something that Christians should take seriously when considering mission in the city. And so there's really this sense, Paul Bramadat in his study, I showed you, Religion at the Edge, he came up with a phrase. It's always good as scholars when you coin a phrase, because then you can get rich and retire. And he said that the commonly held value in the Pacific Northwest, doesn't matter whether you call yourself religious or not, is what he calls reverential naturalism. Reverential naturalism. That people here seem in common to hold a value, that they have a deep sense of reverence for the natural world. Whatever that means, but that's kind of a commonly held value. So focus group participants and clergy were trying to work out, what does it mean to articulate clearly a theology of creation from a Christian perspective that, in Charles Taylor's language of overlapping consensus, has a meeting place with our more secular neighbors, to be able to demonstrate joy and a sense of grace and goodness in this world that we share. So those are some of the insights that I have. I have more, but I want you to do some work before we close when we're talking about heaven on earth. How does this research connect with your own experience of Christian life and witness in British Columbia and the Yukon? Maybe there was a certain section there of those 7 that seemed to work. I'll go back and put those ones up on the screen for you for your discussion. And then what questions does this spark for you as you contemplate the current and future witness of the church in British Columbia and the Yukon? Because you're going to be doing good work on that tomorrow. So just love for you to take a few minutes and kind of respond to what you've heard. I'll leave this up here just in case that's other outcomes. Let me go to this one here. This is the Reconciliation Totem Pole here at UBC. If you're just visiting St. Mark's for the weekend, get up early and take a power walk to the other end of campus. It's a powerful thing to see. So befriending a spiritual, not religious culture, affordable housing as a missional connection, discerning models of Christian witness, good news in light of troubling colonial history, changing face of Christianity in Vancouver, scarce sacred space, and ecology and theology. Turn to someone around you and figure out, how does that connect with your own experience of church? So heaven on earth, what do you think? In light of some of the thoughts that I shared about Christian witness in Vancouver, we do live in a beautiful place. That's my beautiful Airedale Terrier, Darby. I try and work her into all of my presentations. So there she is there. What did that spark for you? We're going to ask Nick one last time to spring to his feet and bring the microphone to you. Maybe it was one of those categories I identified, whether it was overall, just your sense of whether that tracks with your own experience of Christian witness in your community. What did you come up with? 2 hands.
Thank you. Marie Zeroni from Victoria.
Wonderful.
And I shared with the group the impact of Laudato Si.
Yes.
And I think the theology and ecology,
Yes.
that was a really good example of how it spoke to all the environmentalists
really
on
did.
the West Coast and,
Yeah.
and around the world.
Yes.
And in many ways, it spoke more to them than it did to many Catholics.
Yeah.
I would say that, I won't say the majority, but anyhow,
Yeah.
very few homilies were preached about it. Very few Catholics actually know about it
Yeah.
to the extent that the environmental circle knows about it.
Yeah.
So I think they felt, and people concerned about the environment felt that it was, that the Pope really spoke to them and heard them first. And he didn't avoid talking about Jesus in it.
Yeah.
So it was
That's
great.
so helpful. Thank you. That encyclical and Evangelii Gaudium, I think, were two incredible gifts to the wider church and world. Thank you so much. It's my friend John Martins.
Well,
Good day to you, sir.
So the one that sort of resonated with me, I didn't get a chance to talk to it in our small group, but talked about the past abuses and the way I think that Christians have genuinely been responding to truth and reconciliation.
Yes.
But I'm concerned right now, and this is something I'd be interested in speaking about tomorrow, is friends of mine who are not Christians in Vancouver, but have trusted me because of what you talked about, decades of friendship, are really concerned now about Christian nationalism. And when I talk about Christianity now, there's a real concern about this, and it's rising in the US. And why should we pay attention to Christianity at all? And I think that's going to be something that maybe people are feeling that as well, but I certainly am.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know much more to add to that. I know that that's on your heart, and it's an area of research for you, John. I think it is really important. Would we not agree that we've all lived lives as followers of Jesus where we cringe upon occasion and think, oh, why is that person, group, whatever, speaking on behalf of Jesus? We've always known that. We've always been kind of hyphenated Christians in our lives. I'm not that kind of Christian, that kind of thing. But it does feel like it's slipping a little bit out of control at the moment. Some of us in the Protestant world envy you in the Roman Catholic world because you actually have a structure and a communication mechanism that can counter some Christian nationalistic rhetoric that many of us feel just kind of woefully inadequate to do. And so there are many of us who are looking to the Roman Catholic world to continue to push back against Christian nationalism. But I think in the short term, it is going to be a significant issue that we're going to wrestle with. Absolutely. Thanks, John. Other thoughts as we land the plane? There are refreshments, I understand, so I don't want to get in the way of that. And I believe my friend President Jerry has some closing remarks, so I want to give him time for that. But anyone else just to...
Well, hello, I'm come from Mexico. I've been living here in Canada for 4 years.
Wonderful.
First 2 years in Victoria, studying there, and then 2 years in Vancouver.
Terrific.
So, well, just as a summary, right, of my group.
Great.
We were talking that it's important, the part of the spirituality.
Yeah.
Also charity. Of course, testimony. But also it's important advocacy, right? But Pope Francis was mentioning once, I remember, I'm a big fan of Pope Francis, right?
Yes, there are many in the room.
And he was mentioning that it's not about proselytism, right?
Right.
Right, and I mean, it depends on every person, but I remember that part from him. But at the end, we need to prepare ourselves. For example, this part of the Christian nationalism that you were just mentioning, right? It's because there's too much confusion, even in ourselves, right? Because we really don't know who's Jesus, right? You need a life in order to really understand him, and you don't even know who is him, right?
Yeah.
We will know who is it until hopefully we go up there, right, to heaven, right? So, we think that we need to continue preparing ourselves. What I can share, I was sharing in the group, is when I was in Mexico, I was with my eyes closed. Right? I used to go to church because my parents go, because my grandpas and grandparents and so on, right? As a tradition, right? And I used to sometimes, study the Bible even, but when I came here, I felt alone. Challenged as an immigrant.
Yes.
And then it's when I really started to
Good.
reading about him. I am a big fan of a Canadian priest. His name is Ronald Rothheiser. I recommend his books.
Yes.
Right? For example, it's Sacred Fire book.
Nice.
And he talks about, in the first pages, hopefully you can read it, and he talks about that it's not only about charity and all this stuff, right? Which is also important, of course, but it's also about correcting those political, economic, social structures, right? That are keeping poor in poverty.
Right.
And are pushing to keep them there. And we all are co-responsibles of it in certain way.
Yes.
Right? And sometimes in my country we said we shouldn't talk about politics because it's not our concern, religion.
Right. Yeah.
But now that I'm understanding it, I cannot say that we should because I'm still learning, right? Yeah. But I think it's too much confusion, right?
Yeah.
And I think that if we really want to change that, maybe Jesus was revolutionary, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So at the end, that's why people kill him.
Well, that's wonderful, and bring that revolutionary spirit tomorrow. I know Nick and Linda will love that energy as you have your conversation. But thank you very much, and a great example of moving to a new place where faith comes alive as well. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for your time and commitment tonight, but I really want to keep you in prayer tomorrow as you go about this good work. This is an amazing college. St. Mark's is doing incredible research, and in this initial stage of the money that Lily has given the college, they've gathered you, and we'll pray for ongoing good work. And I believe I have the privilege now to turn things over to my friend Jerry for some final words. Is that correct? Nick, Jerry, Nick, Jerry.
Well, thank you so much. That was an unbelievably stimulating but also reflective experience. So thank you so much. I was told to keep my comments under 40 minutes. So, but as this evening comes to a close, I want to take this opportunity to celebrate the achievement that this event really represents, and to give you an idea of how this will help us move into the future. In February 2025, St. Mark's was awarded, as you know, a Pathways for Tomorrow assessment and planning grant of $50,000 US, so $4 million Canadian. The purpose of this grant was to strengthen and sustain our schools' capacity to prepare and support pastoral leaders for Christian churches. And I think the team at St. Mark's College proposed to do that through building these relationships and helping us to focus BC and the Yukon, but studying the future of ministry in our diocese. The culmination of this grant was to bring together leaders in ministry from all over, and many of you are here. Tonight's lecture and discussion by Reverend Dr. Ross, and I'm not stuttering here, I believe you have 2 doctorates, so Dr. Ross Lockhart is really the first step for these participants. Tomorrow, somebody wrote here, tomorrow the 30-odd participants, I'm not saying you're odd, but the 30 or so participants were meeting really to fulfill this grant. The planning and assessment grant that we received was to help us to prepare this summit proposal for a bigger grant from the Pathways for Tomorrow project funded by the Lilly Endowment. The purpose of this larger grant is to strengthen institutional, financial, and educational capacities to prepare and support pastoral leaders for the long term. Thank you, Dr. Robitaille, for giving me these detailed notes. The proposal of St. Mark's College put together this project titled The Future of Ministry, Forming and Empowering Leaders for Mission in BC and the Yukon. And this proposal envisions building a center for ministerial formation here at St. Mark's College. I'm kind of burying the lead here because I'm really pleased to announce this evening that St. Mark's College learned just a few days ago that we were awarded a Pathways for Tomorrow individual school implementation grant of $1 million US by the Lilly Endowment. So before I release you to the refreshments, I just want to congratulate the grant proposal team. So Dr. Nick Olkovich, Reverend Dr. Nick Meisel, who just got his doctorate as well, so that deserves a round of applause. Dr. Fiona Lee and Dr. Linda Robitaille. This is an amazing achievement. I really congratulate my colleagues for this. I feel a bit humbled now, and I don't know how to lead them because now they're millionaires, but Nevertheless, it is thrilling. Thank you, Ross, for an absolutely inspiring start to this meeting. God bless everyone, and I welcome you for refreshments, and welcome.